The people who cast the votes decide nothing. The people who count the votes decide everything. This chilling quote, often attributed to Stalin, exposes the brutal reality of authoritarian elections, where the outcome is predetermined and democracy is merely an illusion. In 2020, Belarus's Alexander Lukashenko declared an 80% landslide victory, only to face mass protests and nationwide outrage as evidence of fraud shattered any remaining trust in the system. But if dictators can simply rig the results, why even bother with elections? Why do leaders like Putin, Xi Jinping, and the Kim dynasty continue this dangerous charade, risking public backlash and global scrutiny? The answer reveals the true power of the illusion of democracy and how it helps cement their control. When North Koreans go to the polls, they face a stark reality, a single name on the ballot and secret police watching their every move. But North Korea isn't alone in this performance. Across the globe, dictatorships have crafted elaborate electoral systems that maintain the appearance of democracy while ensuring power remains firmly in the hands of those already holding it. Russia's electoral system represents perhaps the most sophisticated version of this charade. While multiple candidates appear on Russian ballots, the system methodically eliminates genuine opposition through a complex web of legal barriers. In the lead-up to the 2024 election, Alexei Navalny, Putin's most prominent critic, died in prison after years of harassment, poisoning, and incarceration. His body, weakened from prison conditions and previous poisoning attempts, symbolized the elimination of political competition in Putin's Russia. China has developed its own approach. Like stagehands carefully arranging actors before a performance, the Chinese Communist Party creates an illusion of local democracy through managed elections for local people's congresses. The party maintains absolute control over ballot candidates through its organizational department, transforming elections into carefully choreographed theater rather than mechanisms for actual choice. Belarus connects to this pattern through its handling of the 2020 election. When authorities arrested popular blogger Sergei Tikhanovsky on dubious charges, his wife Svetlana stepped in, only to be forced into exile after Lukashenko claimed an implausible 80% victory despite massive public opposition. Where Russia eliminates competitors systematically, Belarus demonstrates a more blatant electoral manipulation. Zimbabwe's system under both Mugabe and his successor Mnangagwa reveals a particularly different approach. The facade of competition exists, but systematic violence, vote buying, and election fraud ensure that opposition cannot succeed. ZANU-PF, the ruling party, heavily relies on vote buying, particularly in rural areas, where voters are bribed with 2 kilograms of flour and a few groceries in exchange for their support. This is why the party has not won an election in major cities like Bulawayo and Harare for the past 27 years, as urban voters are not as easily swayed by such handouts. Turkmenistan, under its authoritarian regimes, has maintained a highly controlled political climate with no genuine democratic processes. Elections are largely ceremonial, with outcomes predetermined to ensure the ruling elite's dominance. The country's political landscape has been shaped by leaders like Saparmurat Niyazov and Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, who cultivated extreme personality cults, suppressed dissent, and centralized power. Despite vast natural gas wealth, economic mismanagement, forced labor, and isolationist policies have left much of the population impoverished. The 2022 hereditary transition to Serdar Berdimuhamedov further solidified dynastic rule, extinguishing hopes for reform. With severe restrictions on freedoms, a pervasive security apparatus, and minimal external pressure, Turkmenistan remains one of the world's most repressive and closed regimes. Myanmar's brief experiment with democracy was abruptly ended by a military coup in February 2021, overturning the landslide victory of Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy in the 2020 elections. The military, which had ruled for decades, rejected the results, detained Suu Kyi, and reinstated authoritarian rule, sparking nationwide protests and a violent crackdown. In response, pro-democracy activists and ethnic armed groups formed a resistance movement, including the People's Defense Forces, aiming to restore civilian rule. These seemingly different systems achieve the same outcome, eliminating political uncertainty while maintaining a facade of democratic legitimacy. These aren't failed democracies. They're sophisticated systems deliberately designed to create the illusion of choice while preventing power transition. The mechanics vary across regimes. Some employ electronic voting machines that leave no evidence of manipulation. Others rely on ballot stuffing. Some permit opposition candidates but deny them media access or resources. Others imprison, exile, or eliminate rivals before they can register. Yet the calculated risk remains consistent. Dictators require elections for legitimacy both domestically and internationally, but must control every aspect of the process to avoid the one intolerable outcome: losing power. They understand that cancelling elections creates more problems than holding carefully managed ones. While modern dictators have perfected the art of rigged elections, this wasn't always their strategy of choice. In the decades following World War II, the number of national elections worldwide remained relatively stable at around 30 per year, until something unprecedented happened that would transform the global political landscape forever. Before 1990, most authoritarian regimes didn't even bother with the pretense of democracy. One-party states flourished openly, dictators ruled without electoral validation, and the international community largely accepted this as the normal state of affairs in many regions. The Cold War's ideological standoff between East and West created a world where authoritarian leaders could align with either superpower and maintain legitimacy without needing to simulate democratic processes. Then came 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, symbolized by the historic lowering of the Soviet flag from the Kremlin on December 25th, leaving the United States as the sole remaining superpower. This seismic shift fundamentally altered the rules of international politics. Democracy suddenly became the dominant global ideology, the expected system of governance, rather than just one option among many. Authoritarian leaders worldwide faced an existential dilemma: adapt to this new reality or risk becoming international outcasts. The statistical evidence of this transformation is striking. Between 1946 and the late 1980s, the annual number of national elections held worldwide remained fairly constant. But following the Soviet collapse, this number began a dramatic climb, nearly tripling to approximately 80 elections per year by 2012, a direct response to the new global order where electoral processes became the currency of international legitimacy. What these authoritarian leaders discovered was surprisingly straightforward. Holding elections, even heavily manipulated ones, granted them access to diplomatic relationships and economic opportunities that complete rejection of electoral processes would forfeit. Those who adopted at least the outward appearance of democracy could engage with the global community while maintaining their domestic control. This realization sparked what political scientists call authoritarian learning, regimes studying each other's techniques for conducting elections without risking genuine democratic outcomes. Russia under Vladimir Putin exemplifies this evolution perfectly. His competitive authoritarianism maintains just enough democratic elements, multiple candidates, election campaigns, nominal press freedoms to avoid complete isolation while systematically eliminating any genuine opposition through carefully controlled electoral processes. The irony is profound. The Cold War's end, rather than spreading genuine democracy as Western leaders hoped, instead taught dictators to mimic democratic forms while preserving authoritarian control. Today's performative elections aren't failed democracies, they're sophisticated adaptations allowing authoritarian regimes to survive in a world that nominally demands democratic governance. The paradox of dictatorial power sits at the heart of authoritarian elections. While these elections help cement control, they also create moments of extraordinary vulnerability. No one learned this lesson more harshly than South Korean dictator Syngman Rhee, whose political career came crashing down in 1960 after an electoral miscalculation that would reshape how dictators approach elections. Rhee's government engineered an election so blatantly fraudulent that it became a tipping point for public outrage. His vice presidential candidate received 100% of votes in multiple districts, while reports circulated that Rhee's opponent had conveniently died just before the election. This mathematical impossibility didn't just insult the intelligence of South Koreans, it ignited what became known as the April Revolution, a tidal wave of public sentiment that transformed from simmering resentment to explosive action. For 14 days, South Koreans flooded the streets in unprecedented numbers. When police killed 186 protesters, mostly students, the bloodshed only intensified the public's resolve. Within 2 weeks of the fraudulent election, Rhee's seemingly impenetrable government completely collapsed, a stark illustration of the dangerous game dictators play when holding elections. Statistical evidence confirms this vulnerability is systemic. Authoritarian regimes are approximately 5 times more likely to collapse during election years than at any other time. Elections naturally generate heightened political mobilization and public attention, creating perfect conditions for revolutionary sentiment to spread if the regime mishandles the electoral theater. Yet, despite these risks, authoritarian leaders continue to hold elections because of their substantial internal benefits. Beyond international legitimacy, elections serve as sophisticated intelligence-gathering operations. The voting patterns across different regions allow regimes to identify where opposition sentiment might be brewing, which local officials are failing to maintain control, and which opposition figures are gaining traction. Information invaluable for targeted repression before dissent organizes into a genuine threat. The Philippines' 1986 election demonstrates another miscalculation with fatal consequences. When Ferdinand Marcos declared victory despite widespread belief that Corazon Aquino had won, he unintentionally catalyzed the People Power Revolution, a movement of civil disobedience that forced him to flee the country. Like Rhee, Marcos misread how much electoral manipulation his population would tolerate. Not all fraudulent elections end in a dictator's downfall, however. In Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko's claim of an 80% victory in the 2020 election triggered massive protests, but failed to topple his regime. The critical difference was external support. While Rhee and Marcos faced their populations alone, Lukashenko received crucial financial and political backing from Russia, allowing him to weather public outrage through brutal repression and economic stability maintained by his powerful ally. The digital age is transforming authoritarian elections in unexpected ways. As social media spreads awareness of electoral fraud, citizens are increasingly seeing through the theatrical performances their leaders stage. The carefully choreographed election day ceremonies that once effectively maintained the illusion of legitimacy are becoming more transparent to populations armed with smartphones and internet connections. To counter this growing awareness, most dictatorships resort to controlling the flow of information. Independent media is suppressed, journalists are jailed or silenced, and access to foreign news sources is restricted. Internet blackouts during elections have become a common tactic, preventing real-time exposure of fraud and blocking opposition coordination. State-controlled media floods the airwaves with propaganda, portraying the regime as overwhelmingly popular while dismissing dissent as foreign interference. By tightly controlling information, authoritarian regimes aim to keep their populations isolated, misinformed, and unable to organize against the system. Moving forward, dictators face an impossible balancing act, maintaining legitimacy through elections while preventing the very awareness these spectacles might trigger. Like stage performers whose audience begins to see the wires and trapdoors Their once convincing illusions are steadily unraveling. The question is not if, but when the curtain will fall on these political theaters. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.